Right, hello and welcome to this Getting Started with SharePad webinar. My name is Richard Chiesa and I'm the Head of Knowledge here at Ionic Information. The webinar today is going to be an introductory course to SharePad, so I will take you through all of the main features. We do have then other webinars and other videos that go into a lot more detail about the features that I'll be discussing today. Now I have switched to the main SharePad view. This is the view that you'll all be accustomed with if you've launched SharePad when you launch SharePad for the very first time. The main SharePad program is divided into two screens, which we call the blue screen and the green screen. The blue screen is affected by the blue buttons here at the top, and the green screen by the green buttons at the top as well. The blue side normally contains a list of instruments. In this particular case, it's the FTSE 100, but it could be any list of instruments you want. And on the right hand side, on the green side, you will see some form of detail of the selected instrument. At the moment I have the chart selected, but there are loads of other features that we're going to go through in a moment. You can easily select a different share to display on the right hand side by simply clicking on the item on the list. So the toolbar at the top that you see here, this is the main toolbar, and this changes what appears on the respective screens. There are two shortcut keys, shortcut buttons for two lists, FTSE 100 and FTSE 350, so you can use those buttons to toggle through them. The third button is other lists, which will contain the list of all the lists that exist in the program. If there are lists that you use all the time, you can substitute them to the buttons, to the first two buttons. So if you use the LSE shares list, which is the list of all of the shares traded on the London Stock Exchange, you can click, drag and drop it over the button. And now my second button here is the full LSE shares list. On the right hand side we will have the green buttons which will affect what you see on the right hand side, so chart, financials, news, directors' dealings, alarms and so on. Each of the screens will then have a smaller toolbar below, and this will contain the options for the screen that you're currently on. So these buttons here, add column, add to portfolio, filter, etc., will affect the list, will allow you to set up what you see on the list, and the buttons here above the chart will allow you to modify the chart by changing colors, adding moving averages, indicators, etc. At the bottom of the screen you will see there's a design button on each side which allows you to design the way the screen appears, and a menu called settings. On the graph, for example, the settings contains all the various graph templates. So you can set up a chart. These are just defaults that come with the program. We've called this buy and hold because it's a long-term chart. We've created a setting called spread bet, which is on a shorter term, mainly geared towards spread bettors, intraday candles, and so on and so forth. By changing the setting, you're changing a way that the graph is set up, but you're still looking at the exact same instrument. So we're still looking at Aviva Group PLC. Similarly, under the list, you have a setting. We can change the way that the list is displayed. So if we select equities growth, we're still looking at the same list of shares, still looking at the FTSE 100, but we're showing a different set of information. And You are obviously free to modify these in any way you want. What comes with the program, they're just examples. They're there to showcase the various features that the program has. I will be showing you then how to change things to suit your needs. Now you can change the size of the blue and green screen by either clicking on the middle bar here, and you can drag left or right to make the blue or green screen bigger. You can use the buttons at the top. The first button here, the blue button, will make the blue screen go into full view. The other button the green button will show the green screen in full view, and the middle button will return to a split screen. Now, let's see about how to navigate the program. There's a couple of ways to navigate the program. The first way is to you can easily scroll down the list. Now you can do it by clicking each share individually, or you can use the spacebar on your keyboard. If you're using if you're doing this on a PC or on a desktop or laptop, hit the spacebar and you will go down the list. And if you do Shift spacebar, you will move up the list that you're currently viewing. You don't have to scroll to look for specific instruments. You can just start typing on your keyboard. If you hit any letter key, a search box will open up, and you can type in what you're looking for. Once you've found the instrument you're looking for, click on OK, and the instrument will be selected. You can search for instruments in 4 ways. You can either type in the name, so for example, Vodafone. You can type in the EPIC code, so for Rightmove, or especially when you're looking for funds, you can type in the CDOL code or the ISIN code as well. If you are not using a computer with an actual keyboard, you can call up the search box by just pressing the orange search button, and that will open up the search box. By default, the program will search within the current list, so it will only search for results within the FTSE 100, but you can ask to search within the entire universe of instruments. So now if I search for Vodafone, I will find all of the instruments that we have that contain the word Vodafone within their name. So the share itself, plus these are a bunch of bonds then that Vodafone has issued. Now, I'm going to slightly expand the list screen, so the blue screen, and I'm going to show you how you can manipulate the list itself. You'll see it on the top bar here. It'll give you the name of the list you're currently viewing. So get FTSE 100 sorted by name. So it's sorted alphabetically by name. You can sort the list using any of the columns that are in the table. So if you would like to sort it by percentage change to see which are the biggest gainers of the day, all you have to do is double click on the percentage change column, and it will sort it in descending order from highest to lowest. If you double click on the same column heading again, it will sort it in the inverse order. This is probably a very bad day on the market because we only have 5 shares in the FTSE 100 that are actually increasing in value today. If you can't fully see the text, like in the case here of the percentage change of Aviva, you can make the column bigger. If you single click or single tap on the column, a little red dot will appear on the right. You can then use that to expand or contract the size of the column. If you would like to move a column to a different position, you can select it, and you can use, once it's selected, the toolbar here at the top is going to change, and you can use the move arrows to move a column left or right. If you want to get rid of a column, there's a delete button which will remove a column entirely. As you'll see when you add new columns, some of them can be a little bit wordy because we try and describe them as best we can, what value you're actually viewing. If a column heading is particularly wordy and you'd like to make it shorter, you can actually rename the column heading as well. So you can make the name shorter or longer. You can enter a description which suits you. Adding columns is pretty easy. There's a button here called Add Column, and you can press that to open up this dialog box, which will display all of the information which is available in the program. The dialog box is divided in several different tabs. General will contain general information about the company, things like the name, the ISIN code, etc. Price, under price you'll find all sorts of price related information. If you want to add a column that shows the percentage change over last year or what yesterday's high was, that's under price. Company, this contains information only for, obviously, for companies. You won't find any, it won't display anything if you're viewing funds, but you will see here things like information about the sector, who the what the broker consensus is, and who the major shareholders are, and so on. Funds and bonds contains columns that are relevant for funds and bonds. Financial, here you will find all of the financial data that exists in the program, from what pre-tax profit was to capital expenditure to then what the like gross profit and so on was. Under the ratios tab, you will find, this is a subset of financials, you'll find all the financial ratios which are calculated. So PE ratio, and you will find things like return on capital employed and debt ratios and so on. Rank column will display financial data, but not as the numerical value, so not show the profits in millions of pounds. It will show you the profits of the company ranked within, for example, its sector. So it will tell you that the company is ranked third out of 35 shares ranked by pre-tax profit, for example. And the last one is technical. Here is where you'll find all the columns pertaining technical analysis, so charting. If you want to display what the latest value of a moving average was, or the percentage change of a indicator over time. That's where you find all these. I'll give you an example. Let's add the price change over a year. So I'm going to go to price, price change, since date, and you can either do the change since a specific calendar date, or in my case I will do since 1 year ago. And I could display the change as an absolute change, so it will give me the change in pence, percentage change, which will give you the percentage change between those other prices a year ago and now, and annualized percentage change. And if the relevant data is available, so dividend data, you can also use total return over that time instead of just using the price change. But I'll do just a 1 year percentage change, click on OK, and now the column has been added. And just as before, I can double click on the heading, sort the list, and now I can see the FTSE 100 sorted by the biggest gainer over the last year, which at the moment is Polymetal International, and double click on it again, and I have Centrica with minus 55%. There's one last thing I would like to show you with adding columns, and that is the combine column feature. There's a combine items button here, and this allows you to apply calculations between two items. I'll show you what I mean. I could take a figure like turnover. Now I'm also showing you how to search. There's a little search box in the top right hand corner. You can just type what you're looking for, and here it is, turnover. And I'm going to use the most recent turnover for the full year. I want the value itself, and I'm going to combine items, and I'm going to divide the turnover by number of employees. Now, the turnover per employee is not a figure which exists among the ratios, but you can create it within the program by just taking turnover, dividing it by the number of employees. And as you saw from the drop down menu, you can do greater than, less than, divided by, percentage change, etc. So if you click on OK, now I have turnover divided by employees, and I can see in millions of pounds how much each employee of a company returns as turnover. If I don't want any more, I select it, I hit delete, and the column's gone. Now I'm going to move to the next section. Section. If you have any questions, you're welcome to type them into chat. I'll just wait for about a minute, and then I'll move on to the next section. So Alessandro, I will be going back to the filtering side because that goes into the program a little deeper. So I will be getting to it as soon as I've gone through the main screens of a program. So I'll get back to that. Right, the next bit I'm going to briefly talk about, and I say briefly because we have a completely separate webinar that is entirely dedicated to charting, because there is a lot then to talk. But I'll go through the very basics of what you can do with a chart. The menu here, the toolbar at the top here is where you will set up most of the options on the chart. Here you can see how much data we're displaying, so it's set to 1 year. You can zoom into the chart by clicking on the chart, dragging and letting go, and it will highlight an area of the chart, and when you let go it will zoom into that area. Double click on it once and it will return to the default selection, which currently is set to 1 year. Double click on it again and it will zoom out, showing you the entire history of the share. You can edit the default amount of data that's displayed on the chart by pressing the custom button, so you can set it to a number of weeks, months, years, etc. Bars will allow you to change the size of the bars or candlesticks that you're viewing. So you can do anything from 1 minute to 12-month candlesticks. So if I click on 1 week, it will change it to weekly and so on. Charts will allow you to change the type of chart, so just a line chart or a bar chart or a candlestick chart. Add, in the add menu, you will see the list of all of the things that you can add on top of the main chart, from legends to moving averages to price channels, stop losses, etc. Under indicators, if you press that, a dialog box opens up and allows you to create indicators that appear below the chart. So I can add, for example, a MACD. The draw menu, when you press it, the toolbar actually changes and it allows you to draw things on the chart, like a line or a Fibonacci retracement. And finally, you will find there's a sharing button which will allow you to actually save an image of the chart. This is useful if you're more than welcome to use the chart on our program. If you have a blog, or even if you're writing a book, you can use it. When you save it, it will automatically add a little copyright SharePad at the bottom. You can also do things like post a chart on Twitter if you have your financial Twitter feed that you'd like to update. You can toggle the crosshair on and off. You can invert the scale of a chart, and you can change a chart from a linear scale to a logarithmic with this button. In the bottom left, you're going to see a design button which will allow you to set up the way the graph looks from things like what the background color is and so on. Now, as I said, I'm going to stop here with the chart because there's a lot more that I need to discuss, and as I said, we will have a separate webinar. We'll be running a live webinar probably in the not too distant future about charts, but you can always look at the recording of an old webinar on charting and technical analysis on our website. I'll give you the link at the end of this. The next section I wanted to show you was the news. Now, we have a news feed which comes from two different sources. We will come from from Dow Jones. It's Dow Jones Newswire's UK news feed. It's a journalistic news feed. It's like the Financial Times and type news. And we also have RNS, which is a regulatory news service. These contain all the company announcements that the company has to make then by law. So it could be financial reports, changes in director and directors' dealings, and so on. You can view the news in just the news for the current share. So it's showing news for Segro. Current list, that will show me all of the news for all of the shares in the current list, so FTSE 100. Or all news is just an unfiltered list of all of the news, and as you just see, it updates then live, and this will contain every single story with no filtering whatsoever. Talking about filtering, you can create filters for news. So if you are looking for certain keywords to appear, you can create a filter. I'm going to create a new one, and I'm going to call it, and I'll ask it to include the words, for example, better than expected, or upgrade, or I will then click on OK, filter, and now it's showing me only stories that contain the keywords that I put in the filter. If you then click on the story, the keywords that you put in the filter will be highlighted on the story itself. Once you're done filtering the news and you like to go back to see everything, you just go to Filter, Exit Current Filter, and the filter you've created will be always among the list of the news filters. So if you go back to apply manage filters, you can simply run the same filter again, and then it's here for future use. You can go back in time with the news by using the older buttons, and then newer to go forward in time, or you can simply jump to a specific date if you're looking for a specific bit of news. You select any date you want and go to date, and it will go to the selected date. There are buttons here at the bottom. Dow Jones and RNS will allow you to turn the feeds on and off. So if you only want to look at Dow Jones stories or just look at RNS stories, you can toggle the feeds on and off. Dow Jones has a feature called Hot News. It will highlight news that it considers particularly important, and if you press the button, you will only see hot news. And this last button is a new introduction, a new feature which we added not too long ago, corporate actions. This will display all of the corporate actions that the company has taken. If you select it, you can see, for example, the details of the rights issue that on the 6th of April, for example, 2017. And you'll see the full details of that particular corporate action. Here you'll find things like splits, consolidations, rights issues, and then takeovers and things like that. If you then press the news buttons here at the bottom left, it will return to the normal news feed. The next section is directors' dealings. Directors' dealings will allow you to view who owns the company. Directors in the company have to release all the information about all transactions they make in shares in their own company. So you can see all of the dealing history here. Every single person that made purchases, sales, or took up options, etc. You'll find the full list here. And you'll see the names of the directors, their role, and what their holding is, and as a percentage of the company. And you will also see major shareholders. So under UK rules, anyone who or any entity who owns 3% of the company is considered a major shareholder and has to release information about their holding. So you can see who the major shareholders in Segro are. So BlackRock and APG, etc. The alarm section, this allows you to set up alarms on the selected share. So if you want to be notified if, for example, the price of Segro rises above £9, you can tick prices rises above. You can press here to open up the details, and if a mid price were to rise above £9, the program will then notify you. It will notify you if you're logged on to SharePad with a pop-up, and if you select the envelope icon here, it will also send you an email, and it will send an email to whatever email you chose as your login. If you then want to get rid of an alarm, you just press a little dustbin button, and that will disable the alarm. The prices section will, this is mainly for references. It's the table containing all the prices for every single day in the shares history. So you can go and check what the open, what the high, what the low, what the close, and what the volume was at any point in its history. The calendar is it just displays a calendar of events that are going to happen. The calendar will always display events of the selected list. So at the moment we're seeing what's going to happen from today to a week ahead within for FTSE 100 stocks. If I were to click on LSE shares, the underlying list now changes to LSE shares, so I'm seeing what's going to happen in the next week for all of the shares on the London Stock Exchange. The other sections, these are slightly more advanced. I'm going to leave you to investigate them yourself. They go beyond the scope of this introductory webinar, so I am not going to go into much detail. Now, the thing that I skipped is the financial section. This is where a lot of the meat of a program is. When you select a share, again, I still have Segro. You can select any share you want, of course. It will display the financial information that's available for the selected company. The financials page is divided into various sections, starting off with summary, and we're going to go through each one individually. The summary is the place where you want to be. You come here and it should, at a glance, allow you to view details of the financial situation of the company. It's designed to allow you to just quickly look at it and go, yeah, okay, this is good, or no, this is not very good. It will take lots of different measurements, and you can see here there's a table of various measurements, and it will then highlight if they are within acceptable parameters or if there's something odd about them. For example, we can see here that the EBIT, so the earnings before interest and tax, has risen by 9.7%. That's good, that's fine. However, the 3-year average has been 11.8% over the last 3 years, so that's highlighted in red. So it's all right, it's 9.7, so it is increasing, but it's not increasing as well as it has done on average in the last 3 years. Pre-tax profit, on the other hand, this has been forecast to drop by 76%, and it is obviously worse than the 3-year average. When everything is good, then it's going to show, for example, the Benish M-score, which is the likelihood that the company is going to go into administration, and it's a measure of risk, and it is a low score, so it is less likely that things are going to go wrong. The summary page will also show you further details like the dividend history, and depending on what company you have selected, it will also show you a carousel here. This little carousel is a design that we created to allow you to very quickly look through at what the history of the company is, and if it has been performing well, if it's performing well now, but also if it performed well in the past, and if it's doing better and better. It asks a series of questions, and it will answer those questions with a chart, and it will give you an explanation below of why this question is important. So does the company pay a regular dividend? And well, the answer is yes, it does. And not only that, it's an ever increasing dividend, and we can see here also there's a forecast for the next 3 years, and it's forecast to increase its dividend yet again. And you can see various measurements for key data, for quality, safety, and general valuation of the company. The company section here at the top will give you generic information about the company. You will find a summary of what the company actually does, who the directors are, where their money comes from. So you can see here, for example, their turnover is coming mostly from North America. And then generic key information like what their quarter 2 announcements and year-end dates are. The next section begins the actual raw financial data. Click on income, and here you have a big table containing all of the income statement details for the company going back 20 years. Or 20 years or more, actually. It is set up in this, we've designed this table to make it as clear as possible, despite the fact that there is, in fact, a mountain of information. If this is a bit too much, there is a summary button here at the bottom, and if you press it, it'll only show the key information, the really, really important bits, and you can toggle this on and off as you please. There's a forecast button at the bottom here, which will toggle the forecasts on and off. If it's off, it will just show you reported data. TTM stands for trailing 12 months, and it will add an extra column which will show you the details on a rolling 12-month basis. So say, for example, the company reports on a quarterly basis, and I think Compass Group does. No, it doesn't. It's on a half-yearly basis. My mistake. So I just pressed the quarterly button. We can now see not just the year-end results, but the individual, in this case, half-year results. If the company reported quarterly, we'd see the individual quarters. And the trailing 12 months will show you the sum of the last 12 months worth of financial reports. So in this case, because the latest financial report was quarter one, so it was the interim for the 2019 financial year. It will take the interim for this financial year plus the second half of the previous financial year to calculate the trailing 12 months. And again, you can turn this off if you're not interested. You can press the design button to change things like the how the numbers are being displayed on the screen. Balance sheet follows the same rules. This is just the balance sheet of the company, so we can see assets and liabilities and debt, etc. You will have noticed on the right hand side here we have 3 graphs. Now you can display any of the values on the screen in one of those 3 graphs. If you'd like to alter this, I don't want to show total borrowing, I would like to show net borrowing. I can select net borrowing, click, drag, and drop it, and now the graph is showing net borrowing. And you can pick any 3 items to display on the red, blue, and green graphs. Cash is the cash flow statement. So again, similarly, the buttons here at the bottom remain the same. You can, just as before, you can show just the key data or the full data by using a summary button. And then again, forecast, trailing 12 months, and quarterly data. The ratios tab, this is a table of all the ratios. This is probably the first bit where you'd like to really dig in, because obviously the absolute figure as a result can be quite meaningless, as if a company has made £120 million in profit this year in a vacuum, it's not telling you very much. Is it a lot? Is it little? We don't really know. Ratios, though, allow you to put that 150 million hypothetical profit in context to what their turnover was and other key data. Here you'll find things like what the price earnings ratio is, and what the return on capital employed is, and so on and so forth. The next section is dividends. This is just simply a table showing you the entire history of dividend payments. So if you're keeping a record and you're not too sure how much a dividend payment was at any particular point in time, you can scroll down this table and it will show that. It'll also show a graph of the dividends over time. And finally, we get to forecasts. The forecast section will display as long as there are forecasts for the company. The forecasts here are a collection of all of the forecasts that come from various brokers who have written a report on the company. You can see how many brokers there are, because you can see here what their consensus is. So on average, it's just about outperform. It's made up of 8 buy, 1 outperform, 10 holds, 5 underperforms, and 0 sells. The forecast financial figures, which are displayed below, these are averages of the forecast issued by each individual broker. So, for example, for turnover, all of the brokers that have issued a turnover forecast will be added to the average calculation, and the result will appear here. The average is a weighted average based on date, so if a broker issued an update on Monday, that figure will carry a bigger weight in the average than one from a broker which last updated its figures 2 months ago, for example. And on the right hand side here, we can see the change in forecast. At the bottom here, we can see we've selected forecast item turnover, and we can see where the current forecast is. That's a little green dot, and we can see how the forecast has changed over time. So the forecast for the 2019 financial year back in April 2018 was quite a bit lower than it is now. It was about £500 million less than it is currently. So it has increased over time. And you can pick any of the forecast figures to view a chart of the changes over time. I'm not going to go and show you exactly how to do it. You can figure it out yourself, or you can ask us, because I don't really have the time to go into too much detail about this, but you can build your own custom tables. It's like these tables, but you decide exactly what figures go in here. And just like all the other screens, there's a sharing button which will allow you to, for example, print the data or export the data as a spreadsheet for analysis somewhere else. Now, I just saw in the chat, there's Jason Lord is asking, on summary, I don't see the carousel you referred to. No, the carousel doesn't appear on all shares because it will display what the most relevant information for that particular company. So, for example, if I were to take a property investment trust, the details here are going to be different. On the summary page for an investment trust, instead of showing a carousel, here we'll show details like the activity breakdown, where the holdings of the fund are. And you can see this for funds as well. You will see the top 10 holdings and things like asset allocation, and if relevant, the top 10 regions and so on. And if this will display if you are looking at a collective of some kind, so investment trust, ETFs, etc. If you are, on the other hand, looking at a fairly standard company, so to speak, like AstraZeneca, for example, you will see then the carousel, because then this becomes more relevant information. Now, I am going to very quickly show you what you can do then with filtering. Again, I have a separate webinar where I go into a lot of detail about this with lots of examples, but I'm going to very quickly show you two things. First, if you like technical analysis and charting, you can use columns to very quickly display if something has happened on the chart. I'll show you. Say, for example, you like to look at moving averages, moving average crosses, and you want to know if two moving averages have crossed. You go to Add Column, Technical, Moving Average, and then I choose Golden Cross, so short-term moving average crossing above a long-term moving average. I want to do it on a daily basis, and let's do a 6 and 21 simple moving average. Look back, I'm going to look back just one day. I only am interested in shares that have just crossed today. I click on OK, and the column will just show nothing or a tick. A tick means a cross has occurred today, and in fact, if I then add the moving averages, to the chart, and I'm going to do a simple 6 period moving average and a 6 and a 21 period moving average, which I'll color in green. And I can zoom right into the chart, and I can see that the moving average, the red moving average of 6 period, has just crossed above the 21. And of course, if I sort this list, I will see all the crosses at the top, and there's only one. Maybe if I go to FTSE 350, I can see there are a few shares in the FTSE 350 where the moving average has just crossed. There it is. And it's probably not very relevant, just behind the candlestick, but there it is. And there's the cross. And there's the cross. And you can do this again if you explore the technical column. You'll find if you can find, for example, MACD crosses or RSI crossing various levels, and it's as simple as add the column, sort the list, and all the positive and all the shares where that thing that you're looking for, in this case a golden cross, has occurred, will appear just at the top of the list. Now this is easy if you're only looking for a single thing, a golden cross or RSI crossing above a certain level. It gets a bit more complicated, of course, if you want to look for multiple things at the same time. That's where filtering comes into play, and that's this button at the top here on the list. You go to filter, you go to apply filter, and we'll create a new filter. I'm going to call this income because I'm going to look at dividend yields. I'll click on OK and OK, and SharePad will create a blank filter for me. There's a blue button here, add criteria, and here is where I decide what I'm looking for. So I'll go add criteria. I'll search for yield, dividend yield. OK, and the yield will be added as a feature, as a criteria in my filter. I go add criteria again. I go yield. This time though I select 1 year forecast, and I go OK. And lastly, I also want to check dividend cover, and I'm going to check that there's a good dividend cover. I can then, now that I've set the criteria, I can set what values I want. So I want the dividend yield to be a minimum of 4%. I want the forecast yield to be a minimum of 4%. I'm also going to set up a maximum and of 12, and that will eliminate the shares that have completely tanked in price, therefore distorting the actual dividend yield to some absurd level like 50% yield. I'm also going to make sure that the dividend cover is at least 2, so the earnings cover the dividend payments at least twice. Once I've set it up, I hit apply, and here are all of the results within the FTSE 350 that match the criteria. It's a big list, so you can go a bit stricter. Let's see what happens if I change this to 5%, and now my list is significantly shorter. If you can then apply this filter to any list you want by just pressing the relevant list button. I press FTSE 100 or LSE shares, and all of the results for that given list will appear on my screen. Once you're done, press exit, and it will return to the full list. The filter you've created will now appear among the list of your filters, so you can access it at any time by just going back to filter, apply filter, select it, and OK, and the filter is here, free to modify. Again, there's a lot to go into with the filtering. I would advise, again, we'll probably run a webinar soon that will be dedicated almost entirely to filtering. I do advise you to, again, go to our website. There's all the recordings for webinars we have run before. So if you don't want to wait for the next live webinar, go there and look at the recording. Now, I've done my 50 minutes of talking. I tried to cover as much as I could within the 50 minutes. I will see if there are any questions. So please type away in the chat and I will answer any question you might have. Well, while you decide what to write in the as a question, I will avoid the just 5 minutes of complete silence by talking about something while I come up with the some questions. So let's very quickly look at portfolios again. Just as before, there is an entirely separate webinar dedicated entirely to portfolios and portfolio management. So look at that. But let's go very quickly how to deal, what you can do with portfolios. Port is portfolio. You can go select a portfolio and press a new button to create a new portfolio. And I'll call this webinar test. And I'll OK and OK. And this is a portfolio at its very basic, is nothing more than a list like the FTSE 100's list, but it's a list that you control. You decide what goes in it. There are two ways of adding shares to a portfolio. If you know what you want to add and you're in the portfolio, there's an Add to Port button here. You can search for an instrument and search for GSK, and GlaxoSmithKline will be added to the portfolio. If you don't know what you want to add because you're simply scrolling through a list of shares looking for inspiration, you find a share that warrants a deeper look, you can select it and then go to Add to Portfolio and then Add Selected Share to Webinar Test. Click on it and the share will be added to the portfolio. Another thing that you can do, you can add a bunch of shares quickly to a portfolio. Say, for example, you want to add all of the shares whose broker consensus is set to buy. Well, you sort the list by broker consensus. You select the last one. You go to Add to Port and then Add Selected and all above to Webinar Test. Click on it and the shares have been added to the portfolio. If you press a button here, this button will always open up the last portfolio that you were looking at. If not, just go to Port, select Portfolio to pick a different one. And now my portfolio is made up. When you select a portfolio, there's a new button that will appear on the screen, or will become available, which is Trans. That's short for transactions. This is where you record all your holdings. You can record cash, credits, and debits, and then purchases, sales, and dividends for whatever share you have selected. Again, this is an entire separate webinar, but have a look. It's most of it is pretty intuitive, and but as I said, there's a separate webinar that goes into a lot of detail on this. Some questions have come in. Mr. Analytical, how can I quickly see what the red line on a chart is? You can use the legend. Go chart. If you go to Add Legend, and that will display the legend in the top. And if you tick this option here, include cursor values, it'll also display the value. So it will show you the open, the high, the low, and the close of Glaxo on the day that I'm pointing at, plus 6 SMA, so 6 period simple moving average. It'll give me the value of that, and the 21 SMA and the value of that. You can so Jason Lord asks, how would I chart a number of companies at the same time? So you can easily overlay a chart on top of the other by using the additional charts feature. Let me remove the moving averages and the indicator so we chart isn't too busy. Say I want to compare GlaxoSmithKline against AstraZeneca and the pharmaceuticals index, sector index, and the FTSE 100. Well, I go to add, additional charts, new additional chart, share or index will allow me to pick anything I want from the list. So I hit create and I'll pick AstraZeneca, and I'll draw a purple line, and I can use a total return or the cash price, so I click on OK. I can then select the sector index, that would be green, and I can also pick the FTSE 100 index. This is just a shortcut to pick the FTSE 100. I'll hit create, and that's going to be red. Press a little colored button to change a color, click on OK, and now I have my chart. Oh, probably that green was a little too pale. Let's pick a slightly darker green because I can hardly see that. There we go, that's better. So now I can see the chart of GlaxoSmithKline, I can see the chart of AstraZeneca, and the pharmaceuticals index and the FTSE 100. The comparison chart will always begin at the same point. So I can see that compared to where they were on the 3rd of October 2018, I can see that AstraZeneca has been outperforming the other three. But if I zoom in, things might change because it changes a starting point. Okay, it's still AstraZeneca is still the best performer, but if you zoom in or zoom out, it will reset the starting point for comparative reasons. Subhash, can you select decimal points for a column? No, you can't, but it's something that we are currently looking on developing. At the moment, the program automatically decides how many decimal points there are going to be based on the value itself. It does it dynamically, but we know that some people want more, some people want fewer decimal points. So we're going to add a feature where you can actually choose how many decimal points each column has. And still, Subhash, does the program select a stop order for a share? I think are you talking about a stop loss? If that's what you're asking for, yes, it can. You can do it in two ways. You can do it on a chart under add stop loss, and you can set a stop loss or stop gain if you want at a value of say, for example, let's do 15%, and we'll do a start date of say sometime in May. There we go, starting on the 16th of May. This would normally be your purchase date. Click on OK, and here's my stop loss, my trailing stop loss set at 15% from the highest point. You can then also set it up under alarms, and that will notify you if a stop loss triggers. So under alarms, you set a stop loss, and I am going to set that again 15% from the start date. So what I do, May 18th, and I tick and select, and that's it. Now, if a price of Glaxo drops below the stop loss, an alarm will trigger and an email will be sent. Mr. Analytical, do you offer trial for live pricing and level 2? No, not a free one. Unfortunately, the exchanges do charge us the exchange fees immediately as soon as we switch it on. However, on a monthly subscription basis, you are free to upgrade or downgrade. So you can upgrade to SharePad Pro to get live prices and level 2 data. And if you decide that you don't want it anymore, you can just go back to the basic version from the next month. So you'll only be paying it for 1 month. Alessandro Bianco, can I see companies included in a particular index, as in this case the pharmaceutical index? Now, so there is a so the two-part answer. With major indices like the FTSE 100 or the DAX or the S&P 500, we have preset lists for those. So if we go to other lists, I can select FTSE 350, and those are the constituents of the FTSE 350 index. I can select Dow Jones Industrials, and that will be the Dow Jones Industrial Average list. When you're looking, on the other hand, for specific sector indices, well, there is a sector filter function in the program. So start off with a list. So I'm going to start off with a FTSE 350. I then want to show all of the pharmaceutical companies within the FTSE 350. So I go to filter, and there's a button here, apply sector filter. Box opens up. I can scroll down, and I can select pharmaceuticals, biotechnology, and marijuana producers, and I highlight this, and it's set it to include. You can highlight multiple ones, so I could select personal care, drug and grocery stores, and pharmaceuticals, and the two sectors will display. Or, for example, if I want to show everything except for pharmaceuticals, I can simply do excludes pharmaceuticals. But if I do includes pharmaceuticals, click on OK, and there it is. Once you've set it up, you can then toggle between the lists. So these are only the pharmaceuticals within the FTSE 100. These are for pharmaceuticals within the entirety of the London Stock Exchange. These are the pharmaceuticals within the S&P 500, and so on. Once you're done, hit exit, and you're going back to the full list. I will, it looks like, oh no, one more question has arrived. So, Alessandro, will the chart update accordingly to the selection? I don't fully understand your question. The selection of what? As in, the chart will update on an intraday basis, so it will be updating constantly as the prices come in. But can you please clarify that question? And Naresh, can I filter for shares which are at a 26-week? I'm guessing that you mean a 26-week high or 26-week low. I'm guessing. Yes, you don't need to build a filter for that because you're just looking for a single thing. So you can very simply add a column for that. Add column, price, and open high and low, high low since, and we'll do since 26 weeks ago. I want the, say for example you want the highest high, so I'm looking for high, and I want the, I don't want the highest close, I want the highest high, and I show how many days have passed since the high was reached. I click on OK. I then sort the list, showing the smallest one at the top, and this will show me how many days have passed since the high was reached. None of them say 0, so none of them are at a high today. But maybe on the FTSE 350, no, it's probably a bad day to look for highest highs. We can select the heading, edit. Let's change this to lowest low instead. We might get some results of that, and yes, we get plenty of those. 0 is, this is how many days have passed since the lowest low has of the last 26 weeks was breached. If the answer is 0, that's today. If the answer is 1, that was yesterday, and so on and so forth. So here it is. I've sorted the list, all the zeros at the top, and here are all the shares that have just today breached the lowest low of the last 56 weeks. 26 weeks. Naresha is also asking, can I analyze sectors performance for a selected period? Yes, well, we have sector indices, so you can look at under all other lists. You'll see, for example, FTSE 350 sector indices, and here they are. These are the indices calculated based on all of the constituents of each sector within the FTSE 350 share. So FTSE 350 mining is an index calculated based on the performance of all the mining stocks within the FTSE 350. And just as you can do with any other share, you can look at the chart, zoom out and zoom in. And actually, showing you the sector indices has remind me, I'm going to quickly show, if you look under other lists, it's not just shares and funds that you're going to find. There's some interesting little goodies in here. One is index Ps and yields. This is useful if you're interested in knowing what the P ratio or the dividend yield is, not for a single share, but for a group of shares. Look under here. For example, I have FTSE 100 dividend yield. Now, this is just a chart showing me since 2008 what the dividend yield of the FTSE 100 is and has been. At the moment, the dividend yield of FTSE 100 sits at 4.59%, and we can see that it was significantly lower back in 2011 and was higher than in 2008. And you can do this by looking at what the P ratio was or any of the sectors as well. Another interesting thing is economic data. You can, under economic data, there are a number of key economic indicators. So, for example, we can look at what the employment percentage is in the UK, and we have here data going back decades. So this is from 1971, and we can see what the employment rate is at each point. The data comes from the various central banks and, and official statistics. So if you want to see the gross domestic product, for example, and we can see the GDP for the UK going back again to 1955. Right, no more questions have come through, so I am going to terminate the webinar here. Before I go, I am going to show you the address. So, and voila. You can at any time access our tutorials by on the options menu. Training zone. Click on that, and here is our support page. You will find text tutorials, video tutorials about specific features, and right at the bottom you'll see the recordings of past webinars. And these are then uploaded after they are run. So here you'll find the webinar, the last time that I ran a webinar on technical analysis or financial data, or so on and so forth. And also, still on our website, you'll find under articles and insight. Here you will find articles written by various like guru investors who will talk about investing and discuss various parts of the market or various techniques. And there's a huge archive of articles going back now several years. So have a look at that. If though you have any specific questions, do call us. We are available from 8 AM to 5 PM Monday to Friday. So this concludes our webinar for today. I hope this has been informative for you, and thank you very much for tuning in, and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye.